Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be discussing the Prime Minister's economic restructuring program. In a recent statement, the Prime Minister announced an ambitious program to restructure the economy in the face of the world economic crises. With us this evening to shed light on this issue is Dr. Mohamed Roshdy, who is an economic and banking expert in addition to a lecturer at Cairo University. Pleasure to have you with us. The Prime Minister said that while the world economies are all ailing due to the crises, starting with COVID-19 and then ending up with the Russia-Ukraine war, as of late, he announced numbers which are quite alarming. He said that recent losses in our economy, direct losses, amount to over 130 billion Egyptian pounds and the indirect 335 billion Egyptian pounds. He's putting together with the government an ambitious restructuring program, which will be announced bit by bit. One of the pillars of that program is private-public partnership, or a plan to privatize state assets in addition to boost private investment. In the press conference, he said that within the next 4 years, the Egyptian government is planning to attract $40 billion, 10 billion per year. And that the private sector will be involved in various sectors of Egypt. And he said that the government managed to actually select certain assets which will be sold to the private sector by the end of this year, amounting to almost $10 billion. Your comment?
First of all, I would like to say good evening for you and our audience, and I would like to thank To The Point program team for this kind invitation today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to start with a quote for Napoleon Bonaparte. Actually, in times of difficulty, great nations like great men displayed the whole energy of their character and become an object of admiration to posterity. Actually, I would like to highlight that the entire world facing a global challenge after the last COVID-19 pandemic. The globe thought that the economy would recover after that, especially after the last wave. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian and Russian war took place. Actually, this is a crucial thing. As you know, and our audience, that Russia and Ukrainian, actually they export more than quarter of the world wheat, feeding billions of people with bread, pasta and packaged foods. Actually, I can in a nutshell share with you and our audience some statistics about the holistic picture globally about wheat and oil. Actually, the wheat ton jumped from $272 in May 2021, as far as I recall, to reach this month to $435, with an increasing percentage, let me say 60%. This is the first thing. In terms of the oil barrel, jumped from $67 in May 2021 to reach this month $112, with an increase percentage 67%. Can you imagine the impact of this on a global scale? This is a crucial thing, actually. If we highlighted this and we go deeply, according to one of the famous theories, which is for Maslow pyramid hierarchy of needs, if you would like to highlight the first need for this pyramid, I would like to just give a brief on it for our audience today. The basic need, which is actually the physiological needs, to eat and drink, and then after that to have safety and then belonging and self-esteem, and then the last thing, which is the self-actualization. If we go for the basics needs, actually, or for the physiological needs, we can see easily the two most important things, which is the energy, which reflected on the price of oil, actually, that jumped 67% in 1 year. And then after that, the wheat. Actually, to return back to our point about Egypt, if we would like to return for that reason, but before returning, I would like to just highlight what's going globally, actually, because nowadays we are not separated from the entire world.
We're not separated, but we need to work on our economy. We need to have an ambitious, aggressive restructuring program, taking into account what's happening globally. The plan to involve the private sector, in your opinion, is it, how do you see it? The involvement of the private sector is also ailing. Yes. The timing, the way we're planning to involve the selling of government assets to the private sector. How do you see that?
Actually, this is an important thing, but before jumping to it, I would like to continue a crucial thing, which is what's happening globally. To answer this, I will answer today 3 questions. Actually, what did we do? Where are we now? And where we want to go? Actually, we'll cover those 3 questions in our episode today. Actually, the objective of this, globally, what's happening, I told you and our audience actually that 2 main things, prices are increased, and this is reflected on a global inflation in the entire world. You can see easily that a lot of developed countries, actually, the pricing or the inflation reached more than 10%. Actually, and large central banks decided on a top of them, the federal actually decided to increase the interest rate by over 50 basis points.
That's why everybody right now is out to save their own economies.
Yes, actually, and this is reflected on a lot of things. Actually, Egypt started with the great things to face such crisis. Starting our, as far as I recall, the bravest decision, which is the economic reform. You can imagine that this is positively reflected on our economy and let us nowadays on a solid ground. We are standing on a solid ground. Starting, I would like to take our audience through the journey to just to highlight how we are handling those global crises in an efficient and effective
Dr. Mohamed,
way.
because we talked about those issues before, the latest developments, which is a plan announced by the Prime Minister to face the world economic crisis, to safeguard the Egyptian economy in face of this crisis. One of the big steps, the tangible steps that are on the master plan or in the roadmap is private sector involvement. This was an issue that was requested by the private sector. The government is responding. You have a lot of assets that would be sold to the private sector. Worth noting, supporting Made in Egypt, supporting our industrial base is part of this plan. How do you see that as this juncture, and how do you see that contributing to alleviating economic burdens that we're suffering from?
Actually, Egypt has two initiatives, important initiatives. The first one, that Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi ordered the government to set a program for private sector participation in state-owned assets with a target of 10 billion annually for 4 years. Yes. This is positively will reflect to get like to attract FDI 40 billion investment for private sector, and this is positively will reflect on the unemployment rate, in addition to actually the budget or the balance of payment deficit, and will help our balance of payment actually import part to be decreased, because we're working on creating manufacturers and to have a solid industry. Actually, if you would like to focus on the economic part, as you know, and our audience, the GDP structure consists actually of three things. The main three things: the industrial part, the agricultural part, in addition to the service part. Nowadays, in a lot of developed countries, they are focusing to increase the service part, because the added value to the economy is quite great. And through this initiative, we will increase this part. And for sure, no one can debate that the agricultural part is quite important. Who can't, just we can't say it loudly, who can't own his food, he can't own actually his decision. For that reason, this is part of the, just we can say it, security for our nation. This is the first initiative that the government focusing on to accelerate the GDP growth, and this is, by the way, one of the most important things. In addition to the last initiative, the previous initiative to increase our export to reach $100 billion.
Yes.
This is one of the most important things, as in parallel with another plan to set 100 incentive for industrial sector to improve Egypt's competitiveness. And I can say it loudly, this is reflected on Egypt's competitiveness global report. As far as I recall, that Egypt competitiveness jumped like 20 places to reach, as far as I recall, number 82 among a lot of countries. This is one of the most important things. In addition to the crucial things, the government is quite cautious to build on the infrastructure.
Let's go back to the investment, private sector and boosting investment. The Prime Minister clearly said in his statement, he highlighted some of the sectors where private sector involvement will be needed in the coming phase. New and renewable energy, real estate, desalination plants, banking, telecom, education, and there is also a plan to get the private sector involved in the transportation at a later phase. The sectors selected, in your opinion, how will they contribute to moving the economic vehicle in a pace to absorb the side effects of the world crises?
Actually, I would like to start with the most important thing, in my humble opinion, the renewable energy part. Actually, because if you have energy and you own it in a proper way, this is a positive signal to attract the FDI easily to our country. The one of the most important thing, which is the CSP, concentrated solar power plants. Actually, the government invested, as far as I recall, $1.2 billion in this strategic project to just send a positive signals to the global community and the investors globally to attract more FDI, and how this can efficiently help the country to be one of the fastest growing economies globally, and it reflected on attracting the FDI. You can see easily that one of the most important agencies just talk about our country, that we are one of the most strategic countries that quite attractive to FDI globally, and they are recommending for investors to come and invest in our country. This is actually reflected also in our on the last credit rating for Egypt, as you know, and our audience today, that Fitch, despite the fact COVID pandemic and despite the fact the latest Ukrainian and Russian war, actually they keep our rating to be positive, with the positive outlook for our country. This is in addition to a lot of mega projects that the government is focusing on in infrastructure, aviation, actually like aviation, they invested in Sphinx Airport, 6th of October City. In addition to, as you said, let me quote you, the transportation projects, the government actually focusing on a lot of mega projects, especially on the transportation. This will facilitate moving between a lot of cities in a Great Cairo and outside Cairo. You can see easily that one of the projects, for transportation and the speed train, you can reach to Alex within like 45 minutes. Can you imagine that? And to reach to Upper Egypt, Aswan, like a couple of hours, despite the fact we were spending a lot of time to reach there. A lot of those mega projects, actually, in addition to that the government is offering percentage of national projects such as electric train to private sector, and giving them the right to manage the project actually in an efficient way. This is one of the most important things that the government is trying to focus on, and sending a positive signals to the global community that we are on the right track. And actually, if we take those things and how this reflected on our figures, this is one of the most important things that helped us to be on a solid ground.
The plan is to almost double private sector contribution in the next three years, from 30% to 65%. In your opinion, is this doable in the sectors highlighted?
Actually, I'm recalling one of the most important quotes for one of the famous strategic planning, which is called Henry Mintzberg. It is easy to plan, but it is difficult to implement. I believe that the challenge is in implementation, honestly. But I believe that the government is setting a solid plan to implement this. In my humble opinion, this is doable, but we can say it, there's a term nowadays, a trendy term called agile. The government, I believe, will use it. What's agile? To just elaborate for our audience, the agile, if you would like to reach to your destination, not just you have to jump like that to reach your destination. Actually, you have to start little bit, step by step, slowly but surely. This is, I believe, that the government is focusing on. Why they are selecting those most important things? As I told you and our audience, actually, if you would like to enhance the GDP structure, it consists of three main parts: the agriculture, the industrial, and the service parts. And if you would like to enhance and have just, can I say it, a booming growth rate, you have to focus on the service part. Why is the service part? Actually, the service part is it has a great and a significant impact, and has an added value, a great added value to our economy. This is the service part. So the government focusing on the telecommunication, the transportation, in addition to the banking. I can say it loudly, those are services sectors, and the added value for those sectors are quite high, and they can lead the country to a different place. And I believe those plans, or the government plan actually, which helped us nowadays to face a lot of global crises with a good or a solid things.
Yes, point understood. The stock market. Stock market usually is a mirror to how it mirrors economic performance. The state has an ambitious IPO program to develop the stock market. It was announced that 10 companies, government companies, will be listed, in addition to military-owned companies will be listed in the stock market this year.
Actually, the government state fully aware of the size of challenges in the stock market, and Egypt is the first country to issue green bonds and Islamic sukuk in a schedule to be published actually, and after that they migrated to the stock market to let a lot of companies that owned by the government to be enrolled in the stock market. And I believe that this is important thing, that we are shifting the ownership for the companies from government sector to private sector. This will lead to enhance the income and the revenue. Actually, I can say it loudly, it enhances the ROI, return on investments, because they will manage it in an effective and efficient way, and they are seeking for profit and seeking for competing in services. Actually, in a lot of countries, you know, there's two significant approaches to manage a country: the capitalism and socialism. Actually, if you would like to migrate for the part of the capitalism, you can say it loudly. You will compete in service, and you will let people or household segment to own things, and they will compete in service, and the surviving will be for the one who can offer better service in the country. And this is possibly will offload the government to be a lot of incremental expenses, and will help to get more income to the country, which will help in allocating those income in actually to invest in two things, which is education part, to increase the education budget, in addition to health budget. And I believe, in my humble opinion, if you would like to build a country, you have to invest in people. And the two things, education and health, are the best investment to just run quickly and jump in the rating or ranking in all over the world.
Debt to GDP. The plan is to reduce the debt within the next 4 years by 75%. The debt GDP ratio by 2026, 75% less.
I would like to reply to your question actually with where we are now and what government did in the previous years. Actually, the GDP to that was, as far as I recall, it's more than 115 in last 3 years, and the government succeeded actually to decrease it by 20%. And currently, it jumped to be, as far as I recall, 85%. Despite the fact we overcome the COVID, the last COVID wave, the last COVID pandemic globally.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the Ukrainian and Russian war helped to increase it a little bit. But actually, And by the way, I would like to share a good thing, good news with our audience actually, which is that the government that the government achieved GDP growth in the first quarter, which is, as far as I recall, 9.8%. That was one of the highest GDP growth in the last during 20 years. Can you imagine what's happening to our country? Unfortunately, the Ukrainian and Russian war reflected on this, and let us amended our growth rate and globally to be 6%. And this is in terms of this crisis, which is, I believe, that's good. Actually, to decrease the debt to GDP, this is an important thing, and the government, the tactical campaigns or the tactical projects like investing in mega projects and investing in enrolling a lot of companies that owned by government to be enrolled in the stock market and the infrastructure, and a lot of projects will help to get an income to the country, and decreasing, by the way, the part of import through the initiative to reach $100 billion exports. Those things will help us to decrease our debt to reach 75% of our GDP growth.
The protection of the underprivileged, because as the government strives to move forward, to restructure the economy, you have quite a burden, which is the underprivileged, who at times, at difficult economic times, suffer. And throughout your reform process, you want to alleviate the burden as much as possible. What can be done to ensure that any economic restructuring, the underprivileged do not pay a heavy price in the process?
Actually, I would like to highlight about three things which are the most important things before answering the part that what the government is going to do to protect them. Actually, Egypt has 10 million citizens benefit from pension. In addition to that, the global trade losses are close to 300 billion, and that worldwide has increased by 350%. In addition to the global economy loss from the current crisis amount to reach to $12 trillion. Those things, actually, it would reflect on all sectors and all citizens. But the government is doing a great things, and honestly, the presidential leadership is focusing on low income people actually, and they are adding, the government is focusing to add 450,000, as far as I recall, families to Takaful and the Karama program, and this is positively will keep the balance in our country.
In the process of economic reform, so far Egypt managed to reduce the unemployment rate from 13% to 7.4%. Within the next 3 to 4 years, since this plan is almost a 4-year plan, how much further do we expect unemployment to be reduced, take into account that Egyptians working abroad are coming back home due to difficult economic situations worldwide. You have more of the young generation graduating and are expecting. We're a youth country. So more, as we talk, new graduates are being launched into the market that are expecting jobs. How can we, within the next 4 years, will we be able to further reduce the current unemployment rate in addition to employing those that are going into the market, or how do you see things?
Actually, let me quote you, we are a youth country, or actually the African continent, they are calling it a youth continent. Actually, if we compare it to Europe, for example, and we see easily the age pyramiding, the pyramid of age, we can see that the majority of our nation are youth, and this will lead we can say it loudly, it will be the government to help them to get or create jobs for them. As you said, that the unemployment rate, as far as I recall, in 2013 it reached like 14%, and nowadays it decreased to reach 7.4%. In my humble opinion, with the sustainable development and focusing on the infrastructure, education, and getting more FDI, this will help us to decrease the unemployment rate, in my humble opinion, within coming years to reach from 6 to 5% actually. And if we sustain this development, we'll decrease it and it will be like the developed countries' unemployment rate.
The plan, the total plan, where do we expect to see Egypt 4 years from now with that plan? Taking into account that the situation globally will not really get that much better.
I can say it in a different way. We have something which called SWOT analysis, and they are calling nowadays the business science, they just changed the letters, not for sake of a changing, they say TWAS or TWAS analysis. What's TWAS analysis? For threats, we have to change it to be opportunities. How to think, how to get from threat and opportunity, and the weak points, how to make strength. Actually, for example, if I can say it loudly, from COVID, it's a threat, global threat. What is the opportunity from this? Can I ask for this? What is the opportunity? Actually, the opportunity, which is a lot of institutions globally, they are transferred for digital transformation. They cut the costs and they provided more, they provided actually better services. And if I applied this thing or this model to our country, I believe that, let me quote you, that the global threat and the situation globally is not that perfect and it's not willing for a lot of countries. But despite this fact, our economy, the projection or the expectations for the Egyptian economy will be one of the fastest economies globally. We can say easily that if we, from the global threat, we can focus on increasing our exports, and this is one of the government's initiatives, the $100 billion for exports initiative, and focusing on attracting FDI to create more projects. In addition to focusing that Egypt, in my humble opinion, will be the gateway to Africa and will be the Middle East business hub. And a lot of multinational companies nowadays, they are investing in Egypt. They are quite smart. Those companies, actually, they are quite smart. Why? Because nowadays the cost of investment is quite low. In addition to that, the government is providing a lot of incentives to the investors, actually. In addition to a lot of infrastructure that the government is focusing on. Those things facilitate a little bit investors' life. The second initiative, actually, that the government is focusing to enroll a lot of companies that owns by the state to be for IPO for international public, for a lot of people to buy on this, and this will help us according to the plan that the government and the prime minister they disclosed last week, as far as I recall, or 2 weeks ago, that we will reach $40 billion in 4 years. Each year we can enroll like $10 billion. Those crucial things and those tactical things will help the country to overcome a lot of crises. For that reason, if I referred back to our SWOT analysis, I get from the threats, the global threats, opportunity to our country, and I believe, in my humble opinion, and a lot of global institutions, they are saying loudly that Egypt is on the right track.
On that note, I'll end our show this evening. Our time is up. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on To The Point. I'd like to thank you, the viewers. We'll see you same time next week. Until then, good night.